She was just a maid, trained to stay invisible. But when the Mafia boss's son collapsed at the dinner table and everyone panicked, she saw what they all missed. She screamed 3 words that changed everything. Now the most dangerous man in the city won't let her leave his side, and she's realizing saving the boy's life might have cost her her own. The crystal chandeliers of the Romano estate sparkled like frozen stars above 200 guests dressed in designer suits and silk gowns. Clara Martinez wiped her sweaty palms on her black uniform, careful not to spill the champagne tray she balanced. At 23, she'd worked as a maid in this Boston mansion for only 6 months, but she'd learned one crucial rule: stay invisible. More champagne, table 7. Barked Mrs. Capelli, the head housekeeper, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. Clara nodded and weaved through the crowd, her heart hammering. She'd never seen this many dangerous people in one room. Don Alessandro Romano's annual charity banquet wasn't really about charity. Everyone knew that. It was where the most powerful families in New England came to show respect, make deals, and remind each other who ruled the streets. At the center table sat the man himself. Alessandro Romano, 42 years old, with salt and pepper hair slicked back and eyes that could freeze your blood. Next to him, his 9-year-old son Luca picked at his dessert, looking bored in his tiny tuxedo. The boy's mother had died 3 years ago. Clara had heard the whispers, and since then, Alessandro protected his only child like a caged treasure. "Papa, can I go play now?" Luca's small voice carried across the table. "After your fruit juice, figlio mio," Alessandro said without looking up from his conversation with the Moretti family underboss. Clara approached table 7, a group of Alessandro's advisors, when she heard it. A wet, choking cough. Her head snapped toward the center table. Luca was bent forward, his small hands clutching his throat. His face was turning an alarming shade of red. "He's choking," someone screamed. The room erupted. Guests jumped to their feet. 2 bodyguards rushed toward Luca, but Alessandro was faster, grabbing his son by the shoulders.
"Luca."
Luca breathed. But something was wrong. Clara had 3 younger brothers back in El Paso. She'd seen choking before: the panic, the wild grabbing at the throat, the desperate gasping. This was different. Luca wasn't gasping. He was convulsing. Clara's eyes dropped to the table in front of the boy. His dinner plate was clean, his dessert untouched, but his juice glass. She saw it. A thin, oily sheen floating on the surface of the cranberry juice, catching the chandelier light like a rainbow slick on pavement. It was subtle, almost invisible, but it was there. And it wasn't supposed to be. "Stop!" Clara heard herself shout. Nobody listened. The room was chaos. A doctor from the guest list was pushing through the crowd. Alessandro was yelling for his car, ready to rush Luca to the hospital. Clara dropped her tray. The champagne glasses shattered on the marble floor, and the crack of breaking crystal finally got everyone's attention. "Don't move him," Clara screamed, running toward the center table. "It's not choking, it's poison." 4 guns appeared instantly, all pointed at Clara's head. Alessandro's guards moved like trained wolves, blocking her path. "The hell did you just say?" growled Marco, the head of security, his weapon steady on Clara's forehead. Clara's mouth went dry, but she forced the words out. "The juice. Look at his juice glass. There's an oil on top, it's not supposed to be there. I've seen it before." "She's insane," someone muttered. "Shoot her," another voice said coldly. But Alessandro's hand went up, stopping his men. His dark eyes locked onto Clara with an intensity that made her knees weak. "You have 5 seconds to explain before I let them put a bullet in your skull." Clara's mind raced. Why had she recognized that oily sheen? Then it hit her. Her uncle, a mechanic in Texas, had been poisoned by contaminated engine degreaser 2 years ago. She'd been the one to visit him in the ICU, had watched the doctors explain how certain petroleum-based poisons left that exact rainbow film. "My uncle," Clara stammered. "He was poisoned. It looked like this." The doctor said it causes throat swelling, convulsions, not choking. If you do CPR or move him wrong, it gets worse. You need activated charcoal.
Now.
Alessandro stared at her for 3 endless seconds. Then he snapped his fingers. Vincent, get Dr. Shaw here. And someone bag that glass. Don't touch it with bare hands. Boss, she's just a maid.
Now.
The doctor, a thin man with wire-rimmed glasses, approached Luca carefully. He leaned down, sniffed near the boy's mouth, then examined the glass Clara had pointed to. His face went pale. She's right, Dr. Shaw whispered. This is chemical poisoning. We need to get him to Mass General immediately, but first, he barked orders at his assistant, who ran for his medical bag. Within minutes, they were forcing activated charcoal down Luca's throat. The boy was barely conscious, his lips turning blue. Clara stood frozen, surrounded by guns and hostile stares, as the reality of what she'd done sank in. She'd just accused someone at this banquet of trying to murder Alessandro Romano's only son. Alessandro moved closer to her, so close she could smell his expensive cologne mixed with cigar smoke. "Who are you?" he asked quietly. "Clara Martinez, sir. I clean the 3rd floor." "You just saved my son's life." His voice was flat, emotionless, but his eyes burned with something Clara couldn't read. "Which means 2 things. Either you're the bravest woman in Boston, or you're part of whatever the hell this is." Before Clara could respond, Alessandro turned to address the entire ballroom. His voice cut through the panicked murmuring like a blade. "Nobody leaves. Lock every door. Every window. Every servant entrance." He surveyed the crowd with cold fury. "Someone in this room just tried to kill my boy. And you're all going to stay right here, until I find out who." The click of locks echoed through the mansion. Clara's stomach dropped as she realized the terrible truth. She was trapped in a house full of killers, and one of them had just tried to commit murder. The ambulance sirens faded into the Boston night, taking Luca and Dr. Shaw to Mass General Hospital. Alessandro stood at the mansion's entrance, watching until the red lights disappeared, then turned back to face his trapped guests. His expression could have frozen hell itself. "Marco," he said quietly. "Status." The head of security stepped forward, tablet in hand. "All exits sealed, boss. 23 guards posted at every door and window. Cell phone jammer activated. Nobody's making calls in or out. We've got 207 people inside, including staff." Clara felt the walls closing in. She stood near the kitchen entrance, still surrounded by armed men who hadn't lowered their weapons since she'd shouted about the poison. Her legs trembled, but she forced herself to stay upright. Alessandro walked to the center of the ballroom, his footsteps echoing on the marble. The crowd parted for him like the Red Sea. "My son is fighting for his life because someone here," he paused, letting his gaze sweep across every face, decided that killing a 9-year-old boy was acceptable. The silence was suffocating. "I don't care who you are. I don't care what family you represent. I don't care if you've known me for 30 years." Alessandro's voice grew colder with each word. "You're not leaving this house until I know exactly who poisoned Luca's drink and why." A distinguished man in a gray suit stepped forward. Vincent Caruso, Alessandro's consigliere. "Don Romano, with respect, some of these guests have come from as far as New York. Surely you don't suspect." "I suspect everyone, Vincent. Including you." Vincent's face went white. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Clara watched as Alessandro's eyes landed on her again. "Bring the maid forward." Marco grabbed Clara's arm roughly, dragging her into the center of the ballroom. 200 pairs of eyes fixed on her like lasers. She'd never felt more exposed in her life. "Tell them what you told me," Alessandro commanded. "About the glass." Clara's voice came out as a croak. She cleared her throat and tried again. The juice had an oily film on top, like a rainbow sheen. It's what certain poisons look like when they're mixed with liquid. My uncle was poisoned by contaminated chemicals at his garage. The doctors showed me." "Convenient." A woman's voice cut through. Clara recognized her as Francesca Romano, Alessandro's sister. She sat at a nearby table, her diamonds glittering. This girl just happens to recognize a poison that nobody else noticed at exactly the right moment. "What are you saying, Francesca?" Alessandro asked, his tone dangerous. "I'm saying maybe we should ask how a random maid knows so much about poisoning techniques." Francesca stood, her designer gown rustling. "How do we know she wasn't planted here months ago, waiting for this exact opportunity? She screams about poison, plays the hero, and we're all supposed to believe it's coincidence." The crowd's energy shifted. Clara felt it like a physical wave, the suspicion turning toward her. "That's insane," Clara protested. "I saved him. If I wanted to hurt Luca, why would I stop it?" "To gain trust," Vincent suggested, stroking his chin. "It's an old tactic. Create a crisis, solve it, become indispensable. We've seen it before in our world." Alessandro raised his hand for silence. Dr. Shaw confirmed the poison before he left. "The glass is being tested as we speak." "Those are facts," he turned to Clara. But Francesca raises a valid point. "You've worked here 6 months. Who hired you?" "Mrs. Capelli," Clara stammered. "I applied through the staffing agency, Prestige Domestics. I needed the job. My mother's sick. I send money home to Texas." "Texas," Francesca repeated mockingly. "How far did the cartel reach to plant you here, I wonder?" "I'm not with any cartel." Clara's voice rose. "I'm just a maid. I clean bathrooms and change sheets and try not to get fired." Marco's phone buzzed. He checked it, then whispered in Alessandro's ear. The Don's expression darkened further. "The security footage," Alessandro announced. From the banquet hall cameras, he nodded at a guard, who wheeled out a large monitor. "Let's see exactly what happened." The screen flickered to life, showing the banquet from multiple angles. Clara watched herself moving through the crowd with champagne trays. Then the camera focused on Luca's table. The footage showed Luca's juice glass being filled by a waiter, one of the regular staff Clara recognized. But then, for just 3 seconds, a figure in a dark suit leaned over the table, blocking the camera's view of the glass. When the person moved away, they'd positioned themselves perfectly so their face never appeared on camera. "Freeze it," Alessandro ordered. "Marco, tell me you can identify that suit." Marco zoomed in, but the angle was wrong. Only the person's back was visible. Expensive fabric, broad shoulders, definitely male. "Could be anyone, boss. At least 40 men here, wearing similar suits." Clara's mind raced. She'd been near that table. Had she seen someone leaning over Luca's glass? The banquet had been so chaotic, so many people moving.
Wait.
"The cufflinks," Clara blurted out. "Can you zoom in on the wrist?" Marco did. There, barely visible on the figure's left wrist, was a flash of gold, a cufflink catching the light. It had a distinctive design, 3 interlocking circles. "I've seen those before," Clara whispered. "Tonight. I saw them tonight." Alessandro moved closer, his presence overwhelming. "Where?" Clara closed her eyes, trying to remember. She'd served champagne to dozens of people. So many faces, so many hands reaching for glasses. But those cufflinks, they'd caught her eye because they were unusual. 3 circles like the Olympic rings, but arranged differently.
"Table 7, she said suddenly.
"One of your advisors." I remember thinking the design was strange when I served him champagne. The room exploded with noise. Alessandro held up his hand again, and silence fell immediately. "Table 7, he repeated. "Vincent, who is sitting at table 7? Vincent checked his seating chart, and Clara saw his hand tremble slightly. "Michael Rossi, Tony Chun, Frank DeVito," and he paused, "and my nephew, David Caruso." Alessandro's eyes narrowed. "Bring them all forward."
"Now."
4 men stepped into the circle, all looking nervous. Clara scanned their wrists, her heart pounding. None of them were wearing the cufflinks. Someone had already removed the evidence. Alessandro had the 4 men from table 7 lined up like soldiers facing a firing squad. Michael Rossi, a stocky enforcer in his 50s. Tony Chun, the family's accountant, mid-30s and sweating profusely. Frank DeVito, a veteran soldier with gray at his temples. And David Caruso, Vincent's nephew, barely 25 and looking like he might vomit. "Empty your pockets," Alessandro commanded. Watches, rings, cufflinks, everything on the table.
Now.
The men complied, hands shaking as they removed their jewelry. Clara watched as the items clinked onto the white tablecloth. Gold watches, diamond rings, various cufflinks. None with 3 interlocking circles. "Where are they, David?" Alessandro asked quietly, stepping in front of Vincent's nephew. David's face went pale. "Where are what, Don Romano? I don't understand." "The cufflinks you wore earlier tonight. The ones with 3 circles." I wasn't wearing any special cufflinks. Just these." David pointed to simple silver studs on the table. "I swear on my mother's grave." Alessandro backhanded him so fast that Clara barely saw it. David crashed to the floor, blood streaming from his split lip. "Your mother is very much alive, you little bastard," Alessandro said coldly. "Don't swear on what you'd happily betray." Vincent stepped forward, his face anguished. "Alessandro, please. David's been loyal. He's family. Luca is family. And someone tried to put him in the ground." Alessandro turned to Marco. "Search them. Strip them down if you have to. And find those cufflinks." While the guards began patting down the 4 men, Alessandro moved to another table where his technical team had set up. A young woman in a black suit, Clara recognized her as Sophia, Alessandro's cybersecurity expert, was examining the poisoned juice glass inside a clear evidence bag. "Talk to me, Sophia," Alessandro said. Sophia adjusted her glasses, not looking up from her tablet. "Preliminary field test confirms oleander extract mixed with a petroleum carrier. Highly toxic, causes symptoms within minutes. Whoever made this knew exactly what they were doing." She swiped her screen. "But here's what's interesting. The glass itself was clean. The poison wasn't in it originally. Meaning someone added it after the juice was poured. The servers filled all the glasses from the same jug. I checked the kitchen footage. Luca's glass was clean when it left the kitchen." Alessandro's jaw tightened. "So it happened here in the ballroom. Someone walked up and poisoned my son's drink in a room full of witnesses." "Bold," Sophia agreed. "Or desperate." Clara watched from her corner, still flanked by guards. Her mind kept replaying the moments before Luca started choking. She'd been moving through the crowd, focused on not spilling champagne, trying to stay invisible. But there had been movement near the center table. Lots of people paying respects to Don Romano, greeting Luca, making small talk.
Wait.
There had been someone who lingered. Someone who'd stood near Luca's seat longer than necessary, even after Alessandro had politely dismissed them. "Excuse me," Clara said quietly. No one heard her. The interrogation was getting louder, more violent. Marco had Michael Rossi against the wall now, going through his suit jacket pocket by pocket. "Excuse me," Clara said louder. Alessandro's head turned. "What?" Before Luca started choking, there was someone standing near his seat. They were there for a while, like they were talking to you, but you'd already turned away to speak with someone else. Alessandro moved toward her.
"Who?"
Clara closed her eyes, trying to picture it. The crowd had been thick. She'd been approaching from the left side, carrying champagne. The center table had been surrounded by people offering greetings. And there, standing just behind Luca's chair, pretending to wait for Alessandro's attention while the Don spoke with the Moretti underboss. Tall man, Clara said slowly. Dark hair, early 40s maybe. He was wearing a navy suit, not black. And he had a ring, a big gold ring on his right hand. I noticed it because the light caught it when he moved his hand over the table. The room had gone completely silent. Everyone was staring at her now. Over the table? Alessandro repeated. You saw his hand over Luca's glass. I didn't think anything of it at the time. I thought maybe he was gesturing while talking or waiting to shake your hand. But yes, his hand was right there, right above where Luca's juice was sitting. Alessandro turned to scan the crowd. Navy suit. early 40s. Gold ring on the right hand. Step forward if that describes you. No one moved.
Now.
Alessandro roared. 3 men reluctantly stepped into the open space. Clara studied them, her heart racing. One was too short, another too old, but the third.
Him, Clara pointed.
That's who I saw. The man was Frank DeVito, one of the 4 from Table 7. But Clara had been wrong about one thing. Frank wasn't early 40s. He was 53, Alessandro's trusted soldier for over 20 years. Frank's face showed no emotion. The girl is mistaken. I greeted you and Luca, paid my respects, and returned to my table. That's all. Then why, Alessandro said slowly, did you remove your ring? Frank's hand moved instinctively to his right hand, which was now bare. I didn't. You're wearing it in the security footage from an hour ago. You're not wearing it now, Alessandro nodded at Marco. Search him. They found the ring in Frank's inside jacket pocket. Heavy gold with a Roman coin pressed into it. Marco held it up to the light, and Clara saw something that made her stomach turn. There was a tiny residue on the underside of the ring. An oily, rainbow sheen. Frank, Alessandro said, and his voice was full of something Clara had never heard before. Betrayal. 20 years. You've been with me for 20 years. You held Luca when he was born. You were at Maria's funeral. You're my son's godfather, for Christ's sake. Frank said nothing, but his silence was confession enough. Why? Alessandro whispered. Frank finally looked up, and Clara saw tears streaming down the old soldier's face. Because they have my daughter. The Calabrese family took Sofia 3 weeks ago. They said if I didn't do this, they'd send her back to me in pieces. The revelation hit the room like a bomb. Gasps erupted. Vincent swore in Italian. Francesca covered her mouth in horror. Alessandro stood frozen, his face unreadable. You should have come to me. They said if I told you, she dies. If I refused, she dies. The only way to save her was to. Frank couldn't finish. He collapsed to his knees. I'm sorry. God forgive me, Alessandro. I'm so sorry. Clara felt sick. This wasn't simple betrayal. This was a father forced to choose between one child and another. Alessandro looked at Frank for a long moment. Then he pulled out his phone and made a call despite the jammer. Apparently, he had override access. Johnny? It's me. I need you to find Sofia DeVito. Last known location. 3 weeks ago. Assumed Calabrese kidnapping, he paused. I don't care if you have to burn down half of Providence. Find her. Alive. He hung up and looked down at Frank. I'm going to save your daughter. And then I'm going to decide whether to kill you myself or let you live with what you've done. Frank DeVito was dragged to the wine cellar and locked inside, still sobbing. Alessandro stood in the center of the ballroom, his hands clasped behind his back, staring at nothing. The crowd remained frozen, waiting for his next move. The Calabrese family, Alessandro finally said, his voice like gravel. This is their play. They use Frank to poison Luca, weaken my family, start a war. He turned to Vincent. Send word. Tell every soldier we have to prepare for retaliation. But Francesca stepped forward, her voice cutting through the tension.
Wait.
Something doesn't add up. Alessandro's eyes narrowed. Explain. Frank had 3 weeks to poison Luca. 3 weeks while his daughter was being held. Why wait until tonight? Why do it at a banquet with 200 witnesses? Francesca gestured around the room. If he wanted to kill Luca quietly, he's had 100 better opportunities. He's been to the house. He's had access. The crowd murmured in agreement. Clara felt a cold dread forming in her stomach. Maybe he couldn't go through with it until now, Vincent suggested weakly. Or maybe, Francesca continued, her gaze sliding to Clara, Frank isn't the only person involved. Maybe someone pushed him to do it tonight specifically. Someone who wanted to be here to watch. Someone who could conveniently save Luca at the last second and become a hero. The accusation hung in the air like poison gas. You're insane, Clara breathed. I had nothing to do with. Didn't you? Francesca moved closer, circling Clara like a shark. You recognized a rare poison instantly. You knew exactly what to do. You just happened to be walking by at the exact right moment she turned to address Alessandro. Brother, think about it. Frank breaks down crying, confesses everything, gives us a convenient enemy to blame. Meanwhile, this girl becomes your son's savior. Who benefits most from this scenario? The Calabrese family benefits, Alessandro said coldly. They have my godfather in their pocket and my son nearly dead. Do they? Francesca picked up the evidence bag with the juice glass. Or do we only have Frank's word that they're involved? What if this girl and Frank planned it together? What if she's the real plant and Frank is just the patsy who takes the fall? Clara's heart hammered against her ribs. That's crazy. Why would I save Luca if I wanted him dead? Because you knew we'd test the drink, Francesca said smoothly. You knew we'd find the poison. Better to discover it yourself and control the narrative than risk someone else finding it and you becoming a suspect. This way, you look like a hero instead of an accomplice. Marco stepped closer to Clara, his hand resting on his weapon. Other guards moved in, forming a tighter circle. This is insane, Clara repeated, but her voice shook. I don't even know Frank DeVito. I've never spoken to him outside of serving him drinks tonight. Can anyone confirm that? Francesca asked the room. Has anyone seen this girl interact with Frank before tonight? Silence. Clara looked desperately at Mrs. Capelli, the head housekeeper, but the older woman avoided her eyes. Alessandro watched the exchange without expression. Finally, he spoke. Sophia, check the girl's background. Everything. Employment records, family history, phone records, bank accounts. I want to know every person she's talked to in the last 6 months. Already running it, boss, Sophia called from her laptop station. And check her room, Alessandro added. Marco, take 2 men. If there's anything connecting her to Frank or the Calabrese family, find it. You won't find anything, Clara said desperately. Because there's nothing to find. Alessandro stepped directly in front of her. Up close, Clara could see the rage barely contained behind his dark eyes. But there was something else too, uncertainty. You saved my son's life, he said quietly so only she could hear. That's a fact I can't ignore. But you also know too much. You appeared at exactly the right moment. You saw things no one else noticed, he paused. In my world, that kind of coincidence gets people killed. I'm not part of this, Clara whispered. I swear on my mother's life. Don't, Alessandro's voice turned harsh. Frank swore on his mother's grave, too. Oaths mean nothing when people are desperate. Marco returned 20 minutes later, carrying a small box. Found this hidden under her mattress, boss. Clara's blood ran cold. She'd never seen that box before. Marco opened it. Inside were 3 photographs. The first showed the Romano mansion from the outside. The second showed Luca playing in the garden. The third showed Alessandro himself, leaving a restaurant. Surveillance photos. Those aren't mine, Clara said, but even to her own ears, it sounded weak. I've never seen those before in my life. Someone planted them. Of course they did, Francesca said sarcastically. How convenient. But Alessandro was studying the photos carefully. These are professional. Long-range lens, good quality. Not something a maid could afford, he looked at Marco. Anything else?
Cash.
$5,000, hidden in an envelope. Clara felt like she was drowning. That's money for my mother. I've been saving. I can show you bank records. Sophia? Alessandro called. The cybersecurity expert looked up from her screen. Her bank account shows regular deposits matching her salary. No large withdrawals, no suspicious transfers. The $5,000 in cash isn't documented anywhere in her financial history. Because it's legitimate. Clara shouted. I saved it from tips, from working double shifts. Alessandro held up his hand for silence. He stared at Clara for a long moment, and she saw the war happening behind his eyes. His son was alive because of her. But everything else pointed to her involvement in something darker. Lock her in the guest room on the 3rd floor, Alessandro finally ordered. 2 guards on the door, 24/7. She doesn't leave. She doesn't make calls. She doesn't speak to anyone except me. Alessandro, you should, Francesca began. Enough. Alessandro's voice cracked like a whip. She saved Luca. Until I know for certain she's guilty, she stays alive and unharmed. But she stays locked up. He turned back to Clara, and his expression softened almost imperceptibly. If you're innocent, the truth will come out. If you're not, he didn't finish the sentence. Marco grabbed Clara's arm. As she was dragged toward the stairs, she caught Alessandro's eyes one more time. I saved him, she said simply. That's the only truth that matters. Alessandro didn't respond. He just watched her disappear up the staircase, his face unreadable. In the wine cellar below, Frank DeVito sat in darkness, clutching a photo of his daughter and praying that both she and Luca would survive the night. And somewhere in the mansion, the person who'd planted those photos in Clara's room smiled, knowing the plan was working perfectly. The guest room on the 3rd floor was nicer than Clara's apartment back in El Paso, but it felt like a prison. Thick carpet, a 4-poster bed with silk sheets, an attached bathroom with marble counters. All of it meaningless when 2 armed guards stood outside the locked door. Clara sat on the edge of the bed, her head in her hands. 24 hours ago, she'd been worried about remembering which fork went where at the banquet. Now she was accused of attempting to murder a child. Her phone had been confiscated, her belongings searched. Even her rosary, her mother's rosary, had been examined for hidden compartments before being returned to her. She prayed anyway, the beads sliding through her trembling fingers. Downstairs, the banquet had transformed into a war room. Alessandro's men were making calls, planning strategies, preparing for conflict with the Calabrese family. The guests had finally been released after extensive questioning, each one warned that speaking about tonight's events would be considered a declaration of war. But Alessandro wasn't with his soldiers. He was in his car, racing toward Mass General Hospital. The call had come 20 minutes earlier. Luca was awake. Alessandro burst through the hospital room door to find his son sitting up in bed, looking small and fragile in a hospital gown too big for him. For lines ran into his thin arms. Monitors beeped steadily. But his eyes were open, and when he saw his father, he smiled. Papa. Alessandro's composure, the iron control that had held through Frank's betrayal, through Clara's interrogation, through everything, finally cracked. He crossed the room in 3 strides and pulled Luca into his arms, careful not to disturb the medical equipment. Figlio mio, Alessandro whispered, his voice breaking. My boy. My brave boy. I'm okay, Papa, Luca said, though his voice was hoarse. The doctors said the lady saved me. The maid lady. Alessandro pulled back, studying his son's face. Clara. Her name is Clara. She was really smart, Luca continued, his eyes bright despite his exhaustion. She saw the poison when nobody else did. Even Uncle Vincent didn't see it. Even Aunt Francesca, he coughed, and Alessandro tensed, but it passed quickly. She's a hero, right, Papa? Like in the movies? Dr. Shaw entered the room, clipboard in hand. Don Romano, I'm glad you're here. Luca's responding well to treatment. The activated charcoal prevented most of the poison from entering his bloodstream. Another few minutes, and he didn't finish, but he didn't need to. When can he come home? Alessandro asked.
2 more days of observation.
We want to make sure there's no organ damage, Dr. Shaw smiled at Luca. But this young man is tough. He's going to be fine. After the doctor left, Luca grabbed his father's hand. Papa, can I ask you something? Anything. Is Miss Clara okay? The guards didn't hurt her, did they? Alessandro's jaw tightened.
She's
safe. She's at the house. Good, Luca settled back against his pillows. Because she saved me. I heard what happened after I got sick. Aunt Francesca told Uncle Vincent that Clara might be bad. But she's not bad, Papa. She saved me. Luca, sometimes things are more complicated than they. She saved me, Luca insisted, his voice growing stronger despite his weakness. I don't care what Aunt Francesca says. I don't care what anybody says. Clara saw the poison, and she stopped it. She's good. Alessandro looked at his son, 9 years old, but in that moment, speaking with a clarity that cut through all the doubt and suspicion. Children saw the world simply. Good and bad. Right and wrong. No politics, no hidden agendas. You really believe that? Alessandro asked quietly. I know it, Lucas said firmly. When I was getting sick, when everything was going dark and scary, I heard her voice. She was yelling at everyone to stop, to not move me. She sounded
Scared.
not for herself. For me, he looked up at his father with Maria's eyes, his late mother's eyes. Bad people don't sound like that, Papa. You taught me that. You said I should always listen to my gut about people. Alessandro felt something shift inside his chest. His son, his innocent, pure-hearted son, had more faith in a servant girl he barely knew than in the family members who'd raised him. Uncle Frank tried to hurt me, Luca continued, tears forming now. Uncle Frank, who taught me to ride a bike, who plays chess with me on Sundays. He's family, and he tried to poison me. A tear rolled down his cheek. But Clara, who just cleans our house, she risked everything to save me. So maybe family isn't about blood. Maybe it's about who shows up when you need them. The words hit Alessandro like a physical blow, out of the mouths of babes. He thought about Frank, his trusted godfather, his brother-in-arms for 20 years, who'd stood at his wedding, who'd been there when Luca was born. Frank had tried to kill his son. Then he thought about Clara, a poor maid from Texas who dropped her tray, screamed at armed men, and risked a bullet to the head to save a child she barely knew. Blood versus action. Loyalty versus proof. Papa? Luca's small voice pulled him back. Please don't hurt Miss Clara.
Please.
She's the reason I'm still here. Alessandro brushed his hand through his son's hair. Get some rest, Figlio. We'll talk more tomorrow. Promise me, Papa. Promise you won't hurt her. Alessandro looked into those trusting eyes, eyes that had seen betrayal from family and heroism from a stranger, and felt the foundations of his world shifting. I promise, he said quietly. After Luca fell asleep, Alessandro stood at the hospital window, looking out at the Boston skyline. His phone buzzed. A text from Sofia. Found something. You need to see this. But instead of rushing back, Alessandro stayed a moment longer, watching his son sleep. Luca's words echoed in his mind. Maybe family isn't about blood. Maybe it's about who shows up when you need them. Frank had blood loyalty and still betrayed him. Clara had no connection to them at all and still fought for Luca's life. For the first time in his career, Alessandro Romano found himself doubting everything he'd built his life on. The family codes, the blood oaths, the sacred bonds of the organization. What did any of it mean when a godfather could poison a godson? And what did it mean when a stranger proved more loyal than family? He made a decision. Whatever Sofia had found, whatever evidence existed, he would look at it with fresh eyes. Not as a Don protecting his empire, but as a father honoring his son's wisdom. Because Luca was right about one thing. Clara had shown up when it mattered most. Now, Alessandro needed to find out why. Clara jerked awake at 2:47 a.m. to the sound of her door clicking open. For a moment, she thought she'd imagined it. The room was dark, only a sliver of moonlight coming through the curtains. But then she heard it, the whisper of fabric against fabric. Footsteps on carpet. Someone was inside. Her heart exploded into overdrive. She stayed perfectly still, her eyes adjusting to the darkness. Through slitted eyelids, she saw a shadow move across the room.
Tall.
Broad-shouldered, moving toward her bed with deliberate silence. Clara's mind raced. The guards outside her door. Why hadn't they stopped this person? Unless they'd been paid off. Or killed. The figure reached the side of her bed. Moonlight caught the glint of metal. A knife. Every instinct screamed at Clara to stay frozen, to pretend to be asleep. But her 3 younger brothers had taught her something useful growing up in a rough El Paso neighborhood. When someone comes at you with a weapon, surprise is your only advantage. She rolled hard to the left just as the knife plunged down, tearing through the pillow where her head had been seconds earlier. Feathers exploded into the air. Clara hit the floor and scrambled toward the bathroom, screaming at the top of her lungs. The assassin was fast, faster than she expected. A gloved hand grabbed her ankle, yanking her backward. Clara's fingers found the bedside lamp, and she swung it blindly. The heavy base connected with something solid. The grip on her ankle loosened. She kicked free and lunged for the bathroom, slamming the door and locking it just as the assassin's body crashed against it. The wood frame shuddered but held. "Help!" Clara screamed. "Somebody help me!" The door shook again. Then again. On the third impact, the lock started to give. Clara looked around frantically. The bathroom had no windows, just marble, mirrors, and a bathtub. She was trapped. Her eyes landed on the toilet tank lid. Heavy ceramic. She grabbed it just as the door exploded inward. The assassin came through fast, knife raised. Clara swung the tank lid with everything she had. It caught the attacker's wrist with a sickening crack. The knife clattered to the tile floor. But the assassin didn't stop. A fist caught Clara in the ribs, driving the air from her lungs. She went down hard, her vision sparking with pain. Through watering eyes, she saw the assassin reach for the dropped knife. Then the bathroom filled with gunfire. Marco stood in the doorway, his weapon drawn, 2 bullets in the assassin's chest. The figure crumpled to the floor. More guards poured into the room, weapons raised, shouting commands. Clara sat against the bathtub, gasping for air, her whole body shaking. Marco pulled the ski mask off the assassin's face. It was one of the guards who'd been posted outside Clara's door. "Jesus Christ," Marco breathed. He keyed his radio. "Boss, we've got a situation. Someone just tried to kill the girl." Alessandro arrived 15 minutes later, still in the clothes he'd worn to the hospital. He surveyed the scene with cold fury, the destroyed door, the feathers everywhere, the blood on the bathroom tiles, and Clara sitting on the bed wrapped in a blanket, a medic examining her bruised ribs. "Talk," Alessandro ordered Marco. "Tommy Ricci," Marco said, gesturing to the dead guard. "Been with us 3 years. Good soldier, no red flags." He was posted outside her door with Davis. "We found Davis unconscious in the hallway closet, knocked out, not dead." Ricci must have waited until Davis went to take a leak, then made his move. Alessandro looked at the knife still lying on the bathroom floor. "That's not a guard's weapon. That's an assassin's blade. Custom Italian steel." "Someone hired him," Sophia said, appearing in the doorway with her tablet. "I just cracked Ricci's phone. He received a wire transfer of $50,000 3 hours ago. Offshore account, heavily encrypted. Whoever paid him knew what they were doing." Alessandro's eyes narrowed. 50,000 to kill a maid. That's not what you pay to silence a co-conspirator. That's what you pay to eliminate a witness. The implications settled over the room like a heavy fog. "If Clara was part of the poisoning plot," Sophia continued, "why would someone pay to kill her now? Frank's already caught. The blame is already assigned. Unless she's not guilty," Alessandro finished. "Unless someone wanted us to think she was involved, and now they're afraid she'll figure out the truth." Francesca appeared at the door, wearing a silk robe, her face a mask of irritation. "Alessandro, what's all this noise?" "Some of us are trying to." She stopped when she saw the scene. "What happened?" "Someone tried to kill Clara," Alessandro said flatly. Well, Francesca's tone was cold. Maybe Frank had accomplices who are tying up loose ends. "Francesca," Alessandro said quietly, dangerously. "If Clara was working with Frank, they'd have no reason to kill her. She'd be one of them. The fact that someone wants her dead tells me everything I need to know." "Or it's theater," Francesca countered. "Stage an attack to make herself look innocent. We only have her word that this was real." "We have a dead body," Marco interjected. That's pretty real. Alessandro made a decision. Marco, clear out the bedroom next to mine. Move Clara there tonight. The room went silent. You can't be serious, Francesca said. The master suite level? Alessandro, she's a servant. She's someone who saved my son and nearly died tonight because of it. Alessandro's voice left no room for argument. She stays in the room next to mine, with my personal guards on the door. No one gets near her without my approval. This is insane. Francesca's composure finally cracked. You're elevating a maid to the family floor because of some sob story? What message does that send to everyone else? It sends the message that loyalty matters more than blood, Alessandro said, and Clara heard an echo of Luca's words in his tone. It sends the message that I protect people who protect my family. He turned to Clara, who was staring at him with wide eyes. Can you walk? Clara nodded shakily. Marco, escort her to the new room. Post 4 guards, people you trust with your life. Nobody goes in or out except me or Dr. Shaw, he paused. And get her some real clothes. Something warm. She's been shaking for 10 minutes. As Marco helped Clara to her feet, she caught Alessandro's eye. Thank you, she whispered. Alessandro's expression softened almost imperceptibly. My son says you're a hero. Someone out there is very afraid you'll prove him right. He gestured to the dead assassin. Find out who paid Ricci. I want names by sunrise. After Clara was escorted out, Francesca turned on her brother. You're making a mistake. You're letting your guilt over Luca cloud your judgment. Maybe, Alessandro admitted. Or maybe I'm finally seeing clearly. He looked at his sister with eyes that had seen too much betrayal in one night. Someone in our circle is playing a deeper game. Frank was just a pawn. Clara's just a witness. The real player is still out there, and they just showed their hand. He walked past Francesca toward the door, then paused. Oh, and sister? If anything happens to Clara under my protection, I'll assume you had something to do with it. Consider that your only warning. Francesca stood alone in the destroyed guest room, fury radiating from every pore. Downstairs, Clara was escorted to the master suite level, a place servants never went. As she stepped into her new room, she realized something terrifying. She wasn't just a witness anymore. She was bait. 2 days later, Luca came home from the hospital. The Romano mansion erupted in cautious celebration, cautious because Alessandro had tripled security, installed new cameras in every hallway, and ordered food tasters for every meal. The house that had once felt like a home now operated like a military compound. Clara watched from the second-floor landing as Luca was carried inside by his father, the boy's arms wrapped tightly around Alessandro's neck. Despite the doctor's assurance that Luca could walk, Alessandro refused to put him down until they reached his bedroom. Miss Clara. Luca's voice rang out when he spotted her. Papa, look. Miss Clara's still here. Alessandro glanced up, his eyes meeting Clara's. Something unreadable passed across his face. Yes, he said quietly. She's staying with us for a while. Good, Luca said firmly. She's my friend now. Clara's heart squeezed. In the 3 days since the poisoning, she'd been called a suspect, nearly killed, and moved into a luxury prison. But this 9-year-old boy, who had every reason to be afraid of everyone, had decided she was his friend. That evening, dinner was served in Luca's bedroom suite. Alessandro had ordered it, refusing to let his son eat in the formal dining room until the investigation was complete. But when the food arrived, Luca stared at his plate like it might bite him. Luca, Alessandro said gently. You need to eat, Dr. Shaw said. What if it's poisoned again? Luca's voice was small, afraid. What if Uncle Frank wasn't the only one? What if someone else wants to hurt me? Alessandro's jaw tightened. This was what betrayal did to children. It taught them to fear the world. I had it tested, Alessandro assured him. Marco watched it being prepared. I had someone taste it first. It's safe, I promise. But Luca pushed the plate away, tears forming in his eyes. I can't, Papa. I'm sorry. I just can't. Clara, who'd been standing quietly in the corner as per Alessandro's orders to keep her nearby, stepped forward. "May I?" she asked Alessandro. He nodded. Clara sat on the edge of Luca's bed and picked up his fork. She speared a piece of chicken, brought it to her lips, and ate it. Then some mashed potatoes. Then a green bean. "See," she said, smiling at Luca. "Delicious and totally safe." Luca watched her carefully. "You're not scared?" "Nope. And you know why? Because your papa is the smartest, most careful man I've ever met. If he says it's safe, it's safe." "But what if?" "How about this?" Clara interrupted gently. "What if we eat together? Every bite I take, you take. That way, if something's wrong, which it won't be, we'll both know." Luca considered this. Then slowly he nodded. For the next 20 minutes, Clara and Luca ate together, bite for bite. Alessandro watched from his chair by the window, his expression unreadable. But his eyes never left Clara's face. This became their routine. Every meal, Clara would sit with Luca, taste everything first, then eat alongside him. She'd tell him stories about growing up in Texas, about her brother's antics, about her mother's terrible cooking, about the time she'd tried to fix a car and ended up covered in motor oil. Luca laughed for the first time since the poisoning when Clara described her youngest brother Miguel getting his head stuck in a fence. "Did the fire department have to come?" Luca asked, giggling. "Worse," Clara said with mock seriousness. "My abuela had to come. And she brought her cutting torch from when she used to work construction." "No way. I swear on my life." Miguel had a weird haircut for 3 months after that. Alessandro listened to these stories from his position by the window or the doorway, always present, always watching. He saw how Clara's presence calmed his son, how Luca's nightmares decreased when she read to him before bed, how the boy who'd been afraid to eat now cleaned his plate just to keep up with her bites. On the 4th night, after Luca had fallen asleep, Alessandro finally spoke. "You're good with him," he said quietly. Clara was gathering the dinner dishes, preparing to leave. "He's a sweet kid," Clara replied. "He deserves to feel safe. Because of Frank, he doesn't. He's afraid of his own family now." Clara set down the plates and turned to face Alessandro. "Then show him that not everyone will betray him. Let him see that some people keep their promises. Like you." "Like you," Clara corrected. "You promised to protect him. You're doing that. He sees it, even if he's scared." Alessandro stood, moving closer. In the dim light of Luca's bedroom, with his son sleeping peacefully for the first time in days, he looked different. Less like a Mafia don and more like a tired father carrying the weight of the world. "I misjudged you," he admitted. "When Francesca accused you, part of me believed it. In my world, kindness is usually a weapon. Loyalty is often a lie. And now I watch you eat chicken nuggets shaped like dinosaurs to make my son laugh. I watch you check under his bed for monsters. Real ones, not metaphorical ones. I watch you give him the kind of care his own blood relatives can't be bothered to provide." Alessandro's voice dropped. "You're either the greatest actress I've ever met, or you're exactly who you appear to be." "I'm a maid from El Paso who got lucky," Clara said simply. "I saw something wrong and I said something. That's all." "That's not all." Alessandro gestured to Luca. "You gave him back his childhood, even if just for a few hours at a time." Clara felt heat rise in her cheeks. "Anyone would." "No," Alessandro interrupted firmly. "They wouldn't. My sister visits for 5 minutes and lectures him about being strong. My advisors send expensive gifts and never visit at all. Vincent can't look at him without guilt because his nephew worked with Frank." He paused. "But you sit on his floor and build Lego sets. You let him beat you at checkers. He beat me fair and square. And you make him feel like a normal kid instead of a Mafia heir who survived a murder attempt." Alessandro's dark eyes held hers. "That takes courage. Different from the courage you showed at the banquet, but courage nonetheless." Before Clara could respond, Lucas stirred in his sleep, murmuring something. Both adults froze. Clara moved to his bedside instinctively, brushing his hair back from his forehead. The boy settled, a small smile on his face. Alessandro watched this simple gesture, this tenderness from a woman who owed them nothing, and felt something crack in the walls he'd built around his heart. "Stay," he said suddenly. Clara looked up, confused. "I'm sorry. When this is over, when we catch whoever's behind this." "Stay," Alessandro's voice was rough. "Not as a maid." As he struggled for the word. "As family. Luca needs someone like you. Someone who sees him as a child, not a dynasty." Clara's eyes widened. "Mr. Romano, I don't think." "Don't answer now," Alessandro said quickly. "Just think about it." He left the room before Clara could respond, leaving her standing in the darkness, her heart pounding, wondering how her life had transformed so completely in less than a week. Outside the door, Alessandro leaned against the wall and closed his eyes. He was falling for her, the poor maid who'd saved his son, the woman who had no reason to care, but cared anyway. It was dangerous, foolish, completely against everything his world stood for. But watching her with Luca, Alessandro realized something terrifying. He didn't care anymore. A week passed. Alessandro's men had tracked down Sofia DeVito in a Providence warehouse, alive but traumatized. Frank remained in custody, broken and awaiting judgment. The Calabrese family denied any involvement, which meant either they were lying or someone was using their name to cover their tracks. Alessandro decided it was time to return to normalcy, or at least the appearance of it. He ordered a family dinner in the main dining room, a show of strength, a message that the Romano family would not hide. "This is a bad idea," Marco warned as staff set the long mahogany table. "We still don't know who paid Ricci to kill the girl. Whoever it is, they're still out there." "Exactly why we're doing this," Alessandro replied. "Flush them out. Make them think we've moved on, that we're comfortable again. Comfortable people make mistakes." Clara stood in the corner of Luca's room, helping him put on a button-down shirt. The boy had grown attached to her presence, refusing to go anywhere in the house without her nearby. "Do I have to go to dinner?" Luca asked quietly. "There's going to be a lot of people." "Your papa wants the family together," Clara said gently, kneeling to fix his collar. "But I'll be right there, okay? I'm not going anywhere." "Promise." Clara held out her pinky finger. "Promise." Luca linked his small finger with hers and managed a smile. The dining room filled with people, Vincent and his wife, Francesca and her husband Marco Bianchi, several senior advisors, and cousins from the extended family. 20 people total, all watching each other with varying degrees of suspicion. Alessandro sat at the head of the table with Luca on his right. Clara stood behind Luca's chair, not sitting with the family, but closer than any servant had ever been permitted. Francesca's eyes burned with resentment. "Alessandro, really? Having the help hover over us during dinner? It's unseemly." "Clara stays," Alessandro said flatly. "Luca wants her here." The first course arrived, a Caesar salad prepared by the Romano family's private chef, a temperamental man named Giuseppe who'd been with them for 15 years. Food tasters had already sampled everything in the kitchen, but Alessandro had ordered Clara to taste Luca's portions as well. Clara took a small bite of Luca's salad. Fresh, crisp, perfectly normal. She nodded, and Luca began to eat. Conversation flowed awkwardly around the table. Vincent discussed business. Francesca complained about a charity gala. The cousins made small talk about sports. But Clara watched. She'd learned in her week of proximity to this world that danger wore expensive suits and smiled while it planned your death. The main course arrived, osso buco, one of Luca's favorites. The servers placed identical plates in front of each guest, the rich aroma of braised veal filling the room. Clara reached for Luca's plate to taste it first, but something made her pause. The sauce. Everyone else's osso buco had a deep, rich brown sauce. But Luca's, his sauce had a slightly different sheen. Almost oily. Just like... "Stop!" Clara shouted, snatching the plate away from Luca just as he reached for his fork. The room exploded into chaos. Guards drew weapons. Alessandro shot to his feet. What the hell is going on? Francesca demanded. Clara held Luca's plate up to the light. Look at the sauce. It's different from everyone else's. Alessandro moved around the table, comparing plates. His face went pale. Clara was right. Luca's sauce had that telltale rainbow sheen, almost invisible unless you knew what to look for. Everyone step away from the table, Alessandro ordered, his voice deadly calm.
Now.
Marco called for the medical team. Dr. Shaw arrived within minutes, along with Sophia and her testing equipment. The room watched in tense silence as they analyzed Luca's plate. Oleander again, Dr. Shaw confirmed, his voice grim. Same poison as before, mixed into the sauce. A concentrated dose. If he'd eaten this, he wouldn't have made it to the hospital. The room erupted. Accusations flew. Francesca pointed at Clara. How did she know to look? How did she know exactly where to look? Because I'm watching. Clara shouted back, her fear turning to rage. Because someone already tried to kill him once, and I'm not going to let it happen again. Alessandro slammed his fist on the table, and the gunshot crack of sound silenced everyone. Enough! His eyes swept the room with murderous intent. There is a traitor under my roof. Not just under my roof, at my family table. He pointed at the kitchen doors. Marco, seal the kitchen. Nobody in or out. I want everyone who touched that food questioned. Everyone who had access to the plates. Already on it, boss. Alessandro turned to address the family. This wasn't Frank. Frank's locked in a cell. This wasn't the Calabrese family making a move. This was someone here. Someone who ate with us tonight, who looked my son in the eye, who smiled and made small talk while planning to poison him. Vincent's face had gone white. Alessandro, surely you don't think any of us. I don't know what to think. Alessandro roared. My godfather betrayed me. Someone in my organization hired an assassin. And now someone at this table just tried to murder my son for the second time. He grabbed Luca's poison plate. This didn't come from the kitchen contaminated. Giuseppe has been with us for 15 years. The tasters checked everything. This was added here, at this table in this room. Sophia appeared at his side. Boss, I need to show you something. She pulled up security footage on her tablet. The angle showed the dining room from above, the long table and all its occupants. As servers brought out the main course, everyone looked normal. But then, a hand reached across the table, quick as lightning, while the servers were distracted. The footage was grainy, but you could see someone lean forward, their sleeve brushing near Luca's plate. Just for a second. Maybe two. Freeze it, Alessandro commanded. Sophia froze the frame. The person's face wasn't visible. They timed it perfectly, moving when heads were turned, when conversation was loudest. But their watch was visible. A distinctive Rolex with a custom band, platinum links with small ruby insets. Alessandro's eyes scanned the table. Stand up. Everyone. Hands where I can see them. The family complied, terror on their faces. Alessandro walked slowly around the table, examining each person's wrists. Most wore watches. Standard expensive pieces. Nothing unusual. Until he reached Vincent's wife, Maria Caruso. Her wrist was bare. Where's your watch, Maria? Alessandro asked softly. I wasn't wearing one tonight, she stammered. You always wear a watch. I've never seen you without it. Alessandro's voice grew colder. The custom Rolex. The one Vincent gave you for your anniversary. Where is it? Maria's composure cracked. I left it upstairs. I didn't think it matched my dress. Marco, Alessandro said quietly. Search her. You can't be serious. Vincent protested. Alessandro, she's my wife. But Marco was already moving. He pulled Maria's chair back, and she stumbled. Something clattered to the floor from beneath her napkin. A small glass vial, still containing traces of oily liquid. The room went dead silent. Maria Caruso stood frozen, her face a mask of terror, as 20 pairs of eyes locked onto her. Vincent's wife, Francesca whispered, shocked. But why? Alessandro stared at Maria, and Clara saw something terrible in his eyes, the death of whatever mercy he had left. "Why?" he repeated, his voice barely human. "Yes, Maria. I'd very much like to know why." Maria Caruso collapsed into her chair, her whole body shaking. Vincent stood frozen beside her, his face cycling through shock, disbelief, and horror. "Maria," he whispered, "tell me this isn't real. Tell me you didn't." "Take her to the wine cellar," Alessandro ordered. "Same cell as Frank. Marco, I want guards who've been with me since childhood. Nobody else." As guards moved to grab Maria, she started screaming. "You don't understand. I had no choice. They have my sister. They have Carmela." The room went silent. Vincent grabbed his wife's shoulders. "What are you talking about?" "Carmela's in Italy. She's been in Florence for 6 months."
No.
Maria sobbed. "That's what they wanted you to think. They took her 3 weeks ago. They sent me pictures." "Oh God, Vincent, the pictures." She broke down completely. Alessandro held up his hand, stopping the guards. "Explain."
Now.
"And if you lie to me, Maria, I'll make what happens next very slow." Maria wiped her eyes, mascara running down her face. "A month ago, I got a letter. No return address. Inside were photos of Carmela tied to a chair. They said if I didn't do exactly what they told me, they'd send her back in pieces." "Who are they?" Alessandro demanded. "I don't know. I never saw faces. Only instructions, phone calls from blocked numbers, notes left in my car, dead drops for the poison." Maria's hands trembled. "First they made me put those surveillance photos in Clara's room. Then they ordered me to poison Luca at the family dinner. They said if I succeeded, Carmela would be released. If I failed or told anyone, she'd die." Vincent looked like he might be sick. "Why didn't you come to me? To Alessandro? We could have saved her. They said they'd know. They said they had people inside the family, watching everything. If I told anyone, Carmela would die before you could even start looking." Maria turned desperate eyes to Alessandro. "I didn't want to hurt Luca. I love that boy. But it's my sister, Vincent. My baby sister." Clara felt a chill run down her spine. This was bigger than Frank. Bigger than Maria. Someone was orchestrating an elaborate plot, using family members as pawns by taking their loved ones hostage. "The same playbook as Frank," Sophia said quietly, appearing at Alessandro's side. "Take someone they love, force them to betray the family." Alessandro's face was stone. "How were you supposed to contact them after Luca died?" "I wasn't," Maria whispered. "They said they'd know when it was done. They'd release Carmela, and I'd never hear from them again." "Convenient," Francesca muttered. "They'd probably kill both of you to tie up loose ends." Alessandro paced, his mind working. Clara could almost see the gears turning behind his eyes. Finally, he stopped and looked at Maria with an expression that made her shrink back. "You're going to help us," he said. "You're going to be our bait." Maria's eyes widened. "What?" "They think you succeeded tonight. They think you poisoned Luca's food, and Clara didn't notice this time." Alessandro turned to Sophia. "Can you fake it? Make it look like Luca ate the poison and is now in critical condition." Sophia's fingers flew across her tablet. "I can hack the hospital records, create false reports, even plant fake conversations with medical staff that anyone monitoring our communications would intercept." "Do it." Alessandro looked at Dr. Shaw. "I need you to examine Luca and declare him seriously ill. Make it convincing. And get him to a secure location somewhere not even I know about. Use the panic room protocols." Dr. Shaw nodded and hurried out with Luca, who looked terrified but trusted his father enough not to ask questions. Clara started to follow, but Alessandro stopped her. "I need you here," he said. "They've seen you with Luca. They know you're watching him. If you disappear too, they'll suspect something." Clara's stomach knotted, but she nodded. Over the next 2 hours, Alessandro orchestrated an elaborate deception. False hospital reports were created showing Luca in critical condition. Sophia planted phone conversations between Alessandro and doctors, all expressing grave concern. The mansion was put on high alert, with guards rushing around in apparent panic. And Maria was moved to a guest room, not imprisoned, but under medical observation for shock. "Now we wait," Alessandro said, standing in his office with his core team. "Whoever's behind this will make contact. They'll want to confirm Luca's condition, or they'll move to their next phase." "What if they just disappear?" Vincent asked. He looked 10 years older than he had that morning, the betrayal of his wife cutting deep. "They won't," Alessandro said with certainty. "This isn't about just killing Luca. If it was, they could have tried a dozen simpler ways. This is about destroying the Romano family from within, making us distrust each other, turning family against family." He looked around the room. "They're not done yet." Clara sat in the corner, trying to process everything. Frank's daughter, Maria's sister. Someone was systematically identifying the family's pressure points and exploiting them. "Boss," Marco called from the doorway. Maria's phone just got a text. Everyone rushed to Sophia's monitoring station. On screen, they could see the message that had appeared on Maria's confiscated phone. "Well done. Your sister will be released at dawn. Await final instructions." Alessandro's eyes gleamed. They took the bait. "Sophia, can you trace it?" "Already trying, but it's bouncing through multiple servers. Whoever this is, they're sophisticated." Her fingers flew across the keyboard. "But they made one mistake. They're using a pattern. Give me an hour, I might be able to predict the next communication point." Alessandro turned to Clara. "I need you to do something difficult." "Anything," Clara said, surprised by her own certainty. "They'll be watching the house. They'll want to see you react to Luca's condition." Alessandro's voice softened slightly. "I need you to go to the medical wing, to the room where they think Luca is dying. I need you to look devastated.
Cry if you can.
Make them believe." Clara understood. She was the outsider who'd saved Luca twice. Her reaction would confirm the lie. "I can do that," she said quietly. 2 hours later, Clara sat beside an empty hospital bed in the mansion's medical wing, her face in her hands, shoulders shaking with manufactured sobs. But as she cried, her eyes watched the window's reflection, looking for any sign of surveillance. In Alessandro's office, Sophia suddenly sat up straight.
"Got it."
"The next message is going to come through a burner phone registered to a coffee shop in the North End. But here's the interesting part. The purchase was made using a credit card belonging to," she pulled up the records, "a shell corporation tied to Romano family investments." "Inside job," Marco breathed. "It's definitely someone in the family." Alessandro's phone rang. An unknown number. He put it on speaker. A distorted voice came through. "Don Romano. I'm sorry about your son. Such a tragedy. But this is just the beginning unless you agree to my terms." "What terms?" Alessandro kept his voice neutral. "Step down. Retire. Name Vincent as your successor and disappear. Do this, and no one else gets hurt. Refuse, and everyone you love will die slowly." The line went dead. Alessandro looked at his assembled team, and Clara saw something dangerous in his smile. "Now we know what they want," he said quietly. "And now we give it to them." Alessandro's plan was audacious and dangerous. Stage another family dinner. "You want to give them another shot at Luca?"
Marco protested.
"Boss, that's insane. Luca won't be there," Alessandro said calmly. "We'll use a decoy. My cousin Paolo's son is the same age, same build. From a distance, in the right clothes, he could pass for Luca." "You're using a child as bait?" Vincent looked horrified. "Paolo's son will be in a different room entirely, appearing via live video feed edited to look like he's at the table." "Technology, Vincent. Sophia can make it seamless." Alessandro turned to his cybersecurity expert. "Can you do it?" Sophia nodded. "I can composite him into the feed in real time. Anyone watching, either in person or through surveillance, will think he's sitting right there." "And the food?" Marco asked. "Every plate will be clean. But we'll give our traitor an opportunity." Alessandro's eyes gleamed. "Clara will announce she's not feeling well and step away from Luca's side. Just for 5 minutes. Long enough for someone desperate to make their move." Clara felt her pulse quicken. You want me to leave him vulnerable on purpose. I want whoever's orchestrating this to think they have one final chance. Alessandro met her gaze. The phone call said, this is just the beginning. They're not going to stop until I'm gone or dead.
So, we end it tonight.
The dinner was set for the following evening. Word spread through the family that Don Romano was addressing his succession plans, that after Luca's second poisoning attempt, he was considering stepping back. The bait was irresistible. 20 family members and senior advisors gathered in the dining room. Alessandro sat at the head of the table, his face drawn with fake exhaustion. Next to him, the video composite showed Luca picking at his food, Clara standing protectively behind his chair. Vincent sat to Alessandro's left, his face troubled. Francesca was across from him, watching everything with sharp eyes. The other advisors, Michael Rossi, Tony Chen, and several others, filled the remaining seats. Sophia had planted microcameras everywhere. In Alessandro's office, monitors showed every angle of the dining room. The first course passed without incident. Conversation was stilted, nervous. Everyone knew about Maria's arrest, about the second poisoning attempt. Tension hung over the table like a storm cloud. Then, right on schedule, Clara pressed her hand to her stomach. "Excuse me," she said, her voice strained. "I'm not feeling well. I need to." "Go," Alessandro said, waving her away. "Luca will be fine for a few minutes." Clara hurried from the room, her heart hammering. In the office, she joined Sophia and Marco, watching the monitors intently. "Now we wait," Sophia whispered. The main course was served: roasted chicken, vegetables, risotto. Servers moved around the table placing identical plates. The composite Luca sat alone now, unprotected. For 3 minutes, nothing happened. Then Tony Chun, the family accountant, stood up. "Excuse me, I need to use the restroom." He walked toward the exit, but as he passed behind Luca's chair, his hand moved to his jacket pocket. "There," Marco breathed. Tony's hand emerged with something small and dark, a vial. In one smooth motion, he uncapped it and leaned forward as if to adjust his napkin. His hand moved over Luca's plate. "Got him," Sophia said, already recording. But before Tony could pour, Alessandro's voice cut through the room like a blade. "Tony, stop right there." The accountant froze, the vial suspended above the plate. His face went white. Guards appeared from alcoves, weapons drawn. Marco entered from the kitchen, gun pointed at Tony's head. "Put it down slowly," Alessandro commanded, standing. Very slowly. Tony's hand trembled. For a moment, Clara thought he might try to run. But there was nowhere to go. Surrounded by armed men, he carefully set the vial on the table. "It's not what it looks like," Tony stammered. "Really?" Alessandro gestured to Sophia, who pulled up the video feed. "Because it looks like you're about to poison my son's food. For the 3rd time someone has tried." The room erupted in shocked murmurs. Vincent stared at Tony in disbelief. "Tony, you've been our accountant for 8 years. Why?" Tony's composure cracked. He sank into his chair, his head in his hands. "They paid me. God help me, they paid me $2 million. "Who?" Alessandro moved closer, his presence suffocating. "The Marchetti family. From Chicago." Tony looked up, tears streaming down his face. "They approached me 6 months ago. They wanted the Romano territory, wanted you gone. They said if I helped them, I'd be set for life. If I refused, they'd expose my gambling debts. I owe $500,000 to bookies, Alessandro. I was desperate." "So you sold out a child?" Clara heard herself say, stepping back into the room. "You tried to murder a 9-year-old boy for money?" "Not murder," Tony protested weakly. "The plan was to make him sick. Slowly poison him over time, so it looked like illness, not assassination. Destroy Alessandro's focus, make him vulnerable. Frank was supposed to start it, Maria was supposed to continue it, and I was supposed to finish it when everyone's guard was down." "Frank and Maria were blackmailed," Alessandro said coldly. "Their families were kidnapped. What's your excuse?" Tony had no answer. The Marchetti family didn't kidnap anyone, did they? Alessandro continued. You made that up. You hired people to take Frank's daughter and Maria's sister to create chaos, to make it look like someone was targeting the family from outside. Tony's silence was confirmation. You used our family's love against them, Vincent said, his voice shaking with rage. You made Frank and Maria into monsters to cover your own crimes. Alessandro picked up the vial, examining it. Same poison. Oleander extract. Where did you get it? A contact in Chicago. The Marchettis have a chemist on payroll. And the money you were paid. Offshore accounts. Cayman Islands. The Marchettis promised more once you were dead, and they could move into Boston. Alessandro set down the vial and looked at Tony with something beyond anger, disappointment, disgust, and a cold finality that made Clara's blood run cold. You didn't just betray me, Tony. You betrayed a child. You used your position, your access, your knowledge of this family to orchestrate 3 murder attempts against my son. Alessandro's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. And you did it for money. I'm sorry, Tony sobbed. I'm so sorry. I never meant for it to go this far. I needed the money. The debts were going to kill me. No, Tony, Alessandro said quietly. I'm going to kill you. Before anyone could react, Alessandro pulled a gun from his jacket and fired once. The shot echoed through the dining room like thunder. Tony chin slumped forward onto the table, dead before he hit the wood. The room fell into stunned silence. Clara pressed her hand to her mouth, her ears ringing. Vincent looked like he might pass out. Even the hardened guards looked shaken. Alessandro holstered his weapon and turned to address the entire room, his voice carrying absolute authority. Let this be a lesson. Loyalty to this family means loyalty to every member, especially the most vulnerable. Betray that trust, threaten a child, and there is no mercy. None. He gestured to the guards. Remove the body. Contact the Marchetti family in Chicago. Tell them their plan failed, and their accountant is dead. Tell them if they ever threaten a Romano again, I'll burn their entire organization to the ground. As Tony's body was dragged away, Alessandro looked at Clara. Something passed between them, an acknowledgement of what she'd witnessed, what she'd become part of. Thank you, he said simply, for watching, for caring, for being willing to testify to what you saw. Clara nodded, unable to find words. The poor maid from El Paso had just watched a man executed at a dinner table. And the terrifying part was that she understood why. The dining room cleared quickly after Tony's execution. Guards removed the body. Servants scrubbed the blood from the mahogany table. Within an hour, it was as if nothing had happened, except for the 20 witnesses who would never forget what they'd seen. Alessandro ordered everyone to remain. The household assembles in the main hall. Everyone. Family, soldiers, staff. I don't care if you're a dishwasher or a capo. Be there in 20 minutes. Clara stood in the hallway outside the dining room, her hands still shaking. She'd seen violence before. Growing up in a rough neighborhood, you couldn't avoid it. But this was different. This was calculated. Final. A man had died 3 feet from where she'd been standing. You okay? Marco appeared beside her, his voice surprisingly gentle. I don't know, Clara admitted. Should I be? Tony Chin tried to kill a kid 3 times. Most people would say he got what he deserved. Most people don't watch it happen in front of them. Marco studied her face. Boss wants you in the main hall. Front and center.
Why?
You'll see. The main hall was the largest room in the Romano mansion, a grand space with vaulted ceilings, marble columns, and a massive fireplace. It was where Alessandro addressed his organization during important moments. Weddings, funerals, declarations of war. Over 100 people filed in. Clara recognized faces from the kitchen staff, the security team, the gardeners. Vincent and Francesca stood near the front with the senior advisors. Everyone looked nervous, whispering amongst themselves. Alessandro entered last, commanding immediate silence. He wore a fresh suit. The one from dinner had blood spatter on the sleeve. He moved to the center of the hall, and every eye followed him. "Most of you know what happened tonight," Alessandro began, his voice carrying to every corner of the room. "Tony Chun, our accountant for 8 years, attempted to poison my son for the 3rd time. He was working for the Marchetti family in Chicago, paid $2 million to destroy this family from within." Gasps and murmurs rippled through the crowd. "He used our trust against us. He manipulated Frank DeVito and Maria Caruso by orchestrating the kidnapping of their family members. He made them believe they had no choice but to betray us." Alessandro's voice grew harder. "And he did all of this for money. Not for family. Not for honor. For cash." Alessandro let that sink in before continuing. "I executed him. In front of witnesses. In front of family. Because there is no forgiveness for what he did. Not in this life." The room was deathly silent. But tonight isn't just about justice for a traitor. It's about recognizing loyalty. Alessandro turned, his eyes scanning the crowd until they landed on Clara. "Clara Martinez. Step forward." Clara's heart stopped. Every eye in the room turned to her. She wanted to disappear, to melt into the floor, but Marco gave her a gentle push. On trembling legs, Clara walked to the center of the hall, stopping a few feet from Alessandro. She'd never felt more exposed in her life. 3 weeks ago, this woman was just a maid, Alessandro said, his voice carrying. She cleaned floors. She changed sheets. Most of you probably never noticed her. Clara saw several staff members nodding, embarrassed. But when my son was poisoned at the banquet, when 200 people, including family members, including trusted advisors, saw nothing, Clara saw everything. Alessandro gestured to her. She recognized the poison. She stopped us from moving Luca incorrectly. She saved his life when blood relatives stood there useless. Francesca's face flushed with anger, but she said nothing. "Then someone tried to kill her," Alessandro continued. "Tommy Ricci, one of my own guards, was paid to silence her. She survived. She could have run. She could have demanded to leave, to get as far from this family as possible. But she didn't." Alessandro moved closer to Clara, and she saw something in his eyes she'd never seen before. Respect. She stayed with Luca. She helped him eat when he was too afraid to trust his own food. She made him laugh when he was traumatized. She watched over him like a mother when his own blood couldn't be bothered. Alessandro's voice grew louder. "And tonight, she stood as bait to help us catch the real traitor. A woman who owes us nothing risked everything." He turned to address the entire room. "Tony Chun was born into our world. Frank DeVito was made decades ago. Maria Caruso married into the family. They all had blood ties, history, obligations. And they all betrayed us." Alessandro placed his hand on Clara's shoulder, and she felt the weight of it, not just physical, but symbolic. This woman had none of those ties.
No obligación.
No history. No reason to care. But she saw what blood ignored. She acted when family froze. Her loyalty, freely given, without expectation of reward, saved my son. The room was absolutely silent. Clara could hear her own heartbeat. Effective immediately, Clara Martinez is under the protection of the Romano family. Any threat to her is a threat to me. Any harm done to her will be answered with blood. Alessandro's voice rang with finality. She is no longer a maid. She is Luca's guardian, caretaker, and protector. She sits at our table. She speaks with our authority when it concerns my son. Shocked whispers erupted. Francesca looked like she might explode. Furthermore, Alessandro continued, silencing the crowd, she will receive a salary befitting her position, housing in the family wing, and full access to family resources. Anyone who questions this answers to me personally. Clara couldn't breathe. This wasn't happening. This couldn't be happening. Alessandro turned to face her directly, speaking quietly enough that only she could hear. "You gave Luca back his childhood. You gave him someone to trust when the world taught him to trust no one. That's worth more than blood. Mr. Romano, I don't know what to say, Clara whispered. Say you'll stay. Say you'll keep protecting him. Not because I'm ordering it, but because you want to. Clara thought about Luca's smile when she read to him. His laughter at her terrible jokes. The way he held her pinky finger when he made promises. That little boy who'd survived 3 murder attempts and still found reasons to be kind. I'll stay, she said. For him. Something flickered across Alessandro's face. Gratitude. Relief. Maybe something deeper. He nodded and turned back to the assembled crowd. This is what loyalty looks like, he declared. Not blood. Not oaths. Not traditions. But action. Courage. Sacrifice. Remember this moment. Remember that when everyone else failed, a poor maid from Texas saved the Romano heir. He paused, letting his words sink in. Now get back to work. And if anyone has a problem with what I've declared tonight, you know where to find me. The crowd dispersed slowly, people stealing glances at Clara as they left. Some looked approving, others resentful. But no one dared speak against Alessandro's decree. As the hall emptied, Francesca approached, her face a mask of controlled fury. Brother, a word in private? Later, Francesca. This is insane. You can't just elevate a servant to. I can and I did. Alessandro's tone left no room for argument. Unless you want to challenge my authority in front of everyone. Francesca's mouth snapped shut. She shot Clara a venomous look and stalked away. When they were finally alone, Alessandro turned to Clara. You understand what just happened. You made me a target, Clara said quietly. Anyone who wants to hurt you now has another person to aim at.
Yes.
But you're also protected. No one touches you without starting a war, he paused. I won't lie to you, Clara. This life is dangerous. But you're already in it. At least now you have the resources to survive it. Clara looked up at this powerful, dangerous man who just executed someone in cold blood and then declared a maid to be family. Why me? Really? Because my son loves you, Alessandro said simply. And I've learned that children see truth better than adults. Luca trusts you. That's worth everything. 3 weeks later, Clara woke up in a bedroom that still didn't feel like hers. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Boston Harbor. A closet filled with clothes she'd never dreamed of owning. A bathroom bigger than her entire apartment back in El Paso. But what still felt surreal was the knock on her door. Not from a guard, but from Luca. Miss Clara? Are you awake? Papa says we're having pancakes. Clara smiled and opened the door. Luca stood there in Spider-Man pajamas, his hair sticking up in every direction, grinning like it was Christmas morning. Pancakes, huh? The chocolate chip kind. Obviously, Luca said with a seriousness only a 9-year-old could muster. The regular kind are boring. They walked downstairs together, Luca's hand in hers, a gesture so natural now that Clara barely noticed it anymore. The mansion felt different these days. Lighter somehow, despite everything that had happened. Frank DeVito had been released after Sofia was rescued. Alessandro couldn't forgive the betrayal, but he understood it. Frank was exiled from Boston, sent to live with distant cousins in Nevada. He'd never see the Romano family again, but he had his daughter. That was mercy in Alessandro's world. Maria Caruso faced a similar fate. Vincent had filed for divorce, but Alessandro spared her life for Carmela's sake. She was sent back to Italy with her sister, forbidden from ever returning to America. The marriage was over, but both women were alive. The Marchetti family in Chicago had sent formal apologies and reparations, $10 million, and a promise to never interfere with Romano operations again. Alessandro had accepted, but everyone knew it was a temporary peace. Someday, there would be a reckoning. But that was tomorrow's war. Today was about pancakes. In the kitchen, Alessandro stood at the stove, a sight that still made Clara do a double take. The powerful Don Romano, wearing an apron that said, "Kiss the cook," a gag gift from Luca, flipping pancakes like a suburban dad. "Morning, Papa." Luca climbed onto a bar stool. "Are they ready?" "Almost." Clara, coffee? Please, Clara said, settling next to Luca. This had become their routine. Every morning, Alessandro made breakfast for Luca. Clara supervised, made sure everything was safe, and gradually, they'd become something strange and wonderful, a family. Not a traditional family, not even a normal family, but a family nonetheless. So, Alessandro said, sliding a plate of chocolate chip pancakes in front of Luca, what's on the agenda today?
Match homework, Luca Grond.
Then Miss Clara promised to take me to the aquarium if I finish it. Did she now? Alessandro raised an eyebrow at Clara. He's been asking for weeks, Clara defended. And he's been so good about his studies. He deserves it. Marco will go with you. And 2 other guards. Papa, do we really need? Yes, Alessandro said firmly, but gently. We really need. The world is still dangerous, figlio mio. But that doesn't mean you can't live in it. Luca sighed but nodded. He understood better than most 9-year-olds that danger was real. But he also understood that he was protected, not just by guards and guns, but by people who genuinely cared about him. After breakfast, while Luca worked on math problems at the kitchen table, Alessandro pulled Clara aside. I need to show you something, he said quietly. He led her to his office, where a manila folder sat on his desk. Inside were legal documents, pages and pages of them. What is this? Clara asked. Adoption papers, Alessandro said. Not for you to adopt Luca. You're too young for that legally. But for me to formally designate you as his legal guardian in the event of my death. Clara's breath caught. Alessandro, I can't. You can. And you will, he met her eyes. If something happens to me, Luca needs someone who will protect him from this world, not push him deeper into it. Someone who sees him as a child first, and an heir second. He paused. That's you, Clara. Tears burned in Clara's eyes. I'm just a maid from El Paso. I don't know how to raise a mob boss's kid. You're not just anything, Alessandro said softly. You're the woman who saved my son 3 times. You're the person he runs to when he has nightmares. You're the one who makes him laugh, who helps him with homework, who reminds him that the world isn't all violence and betrayal. His voice grew rough with emotion. You're exactly who he needs. Clara wiped her eyes. Okay. Yes. I'll sign. Alessandro handed her a pen, and she signed the documents with a shaking hand. When it was done, he pulled her into an unexpected embrace. Thank you, he whispered, for everything. That evening, after the aquarium trip, where Luca talked nonstop about sea turtles, the 3 of them sat in the mansion's library. Luca was curled up between Clara and Alessandro on the sofa, reading a book about marine biology. Miss Clara? Luca said suddenly, looking up. Yeah, kiddo. Are you going to stay forever? Like, really forever? Clara glanced at Alessandro, who nodded almost imperceptibly. Yeah, she said, pulling Luca closer. I'm going to stay forever. Good, Luca snuggled against her. Because you're family now, right, Papa? Alessandro looked at them both, this boy who'd survived 3 murder attempts and this woman who'd saved him each time. His eyes held a softness that few people ever saw. Right, he said quietly. She's family now. Later that night, after Luca was asleep, Alessandro stood at his son's bedroom door, watching Clara read one more chapter, even though the boy was already dreaming. She was still there, still protecting, still caring. He thought about Tony Chun, about Frank, about Maria, people bound to him by blood, and oaths who'd betrayed everything. Then he thought about Clara, who'd had no reason to care, but cared anyway. Francesca appeared beside him in the hallway, her expression softer than it had been in weeks. She's good for him, Francesca admitted grudgingly. Yes, Alessandro agreed. You care about her, not just because of Luca. Alessandro didn't deny it. When the world tried to poison my blood, he said quietly, watching Clara smile as she closed the book and kissed Luca's forehead, she became part of it instead. And in that moment, Alessandro Romano, feared mob boss, ruthless leader, a man who'd killed without hesitation, felt something he hadn't felt since his wife died. Hope.